Kamish, it's relatively quiet during the this week. It's been a pretty quiet. The teams are in that pause before they head to spring training. Jason Stark had a really, Jason Stark just comes up with great stuff that he writes. It's just fun stuff, but also relevant. He did a thing in the Athletic today that was pretty good, and because I haven't been paying much attention to the ins and the outs, the ramifications of the scheduling change, and I don't think I've ever asked you about it, other than maybe in conversation we've noted that the Cardinals will play, 13 times against their division mates rather than 19. So that does change the schedule to a pretty good extent. They'll have more tough games. But Jason Stark was talking about it, what a change this would be. But I never got your expansive feelings on this. Do you like the change in the format?
No. I thought, historically, baseball has. I mean, when they went to divisions, the division races were decided by divisional play. In the 12-team leagues, which I guess we're most accustomed with because they had those for many, many years. You had 18 in your division, and 12 outside your division, and 0 against the American League for the most part. And then that changed over the years. They went down to 16 or 17 to include some interleague games, and then it went down, to 6 or 7 games within your outside your division and in your league to accommodate interleague play. But you still had 19 games with your division, and now you're telling me that only 52 out of 162, 1/3 of your schedule is devoted to division games, and the other 110 games, 110 are not. That's
right.
Crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And if you have a hot division race, and you're going to have some. We didn't have very many last year, but you're going to have some. Like the Mets and Braves had a terrific race last year, even though they both got in. Wouldn't those teams, their fans, like to see 19 games of those teams? Maybe not. Maybe you want to see a bunch more games against Oakland and some of those clubs in the American League, aren't very good. Anything in the AL Central almost, Kansas City, Detroit. But I don't like it if you can't sell your own division with divisional games.
And if I could put a couple things in here that, again, courtesy of Jason Stark, this goes without saying, but he identified some examples. Now, the schedule is not going to work the same way for every team, to say the least. But I'll give you an example. The Mets will take only 2 trips to the Pacific time zone all season. Okay? It's just the way they came up with the home and away for each team outside the division. So the Mets are going to take only 2 trips all year to the Pacific time zone. But the Phillies, who presumably will at least be trying to chase the Mets, they're going to have 4 trips to the West Coast. But most of any team in the NL East or the AL East. Now, part of it is because the Phillies requested that they'd rather have like short series rather than these 3 city stops and all that. They don't mind going back and forth. But that's kind of weird, where, you got 2 teams presumably going to be fighting it out. One of them's got to make 4 trips west, the other one 2. It may not sound like much, but it could mean something. And then, you go ahead, sir.
If the games are even, if the games are even, now maybe the Mets are playing some 3-city trips down those West Coast trips. I don't know. I haven't looked at their schedule that closely. And the Phillies may be only playing 2 teams at a time. And does Arizona count as West Coast? Does Colorado count as West Coast?
Here's one that caught my eye, too. And this speaks to your point about the division games should matter more, and there should be more of them, or at least the same amount we've been seeing. According to Jason Stark, the Yankees are going to play as many games in April against the Twins, 6, as the entire AL East. And the Giants, Phillies, and Padres will all visit Yankee Stadium before the Red Sox make their first visit on June 9th. Now, something ain't right about that, man. That's, that ain't right.
And every other league, football, hockey, basketball, you've got a lot more, divisional or conference games, shall we say, than you do outside of it. you don't have 46 interleague games. Why you need 46? It was a big deal when they had like 12. Now 46.
Commissioner Manford, that's his mandate, I guess. The Cardinals, by the way, primarily because of the London trip to play the Cubs, they're gonna for whatever it's worth, they're gonna fly 10,000 more miles this season than the Brewers. Does that mean anything? Could that mean anything?
A little bit, I guess. Yeah, but there's so many trips. You divide 10,000 by the number of times they're in the plane, and it may not all that much. You know, they probably take how many aircraft during a season? You've got 81. Let's say every series was 3 games. That'd be 54 flights there, I guess. It wouldn't be that much, actually. You know.
Right.
So
That's what I
know.
kind of think.
I don't know.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
I think they've given them. They've got 2 days off between a series in Washington. The Cardinals go to New York, play the Mets, and they play Washington like a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then they have Thursday and Friday off before they play in London. Now, I understand you're going to lose half a day getting there to London, but still. And they get a day off after that when they get back, and they're home. So that's not too bad. I mean, they wanted to play there. I mean, London doesn't want to see the Brewers play. Or maybe they do. I don't. Maybe they do.
They might. You know, just they like to drink their pints over there, right?
Yeah, good point.
Now, here's something that I think is interesting. Cardinals fans will like hearing this. So one of the things, and I'm going to put it on myself. I've talked about it a lot as well. So easy in the NL Central. Cardinals get to beat up bad teams, but next year, you know, they're not going to have as many games against, you know, the Pirates and the Cubs and the Reds and you know, so their schedule is going to be tougher. Now, if you go by, and I know that this is not necessarily going to reflect the reality once they start playing, but if you go by last year's winning percentages, right? Last year, the Cardinals had tied for the easiest schedule in the majors with the Astros because their opponents collectively had a .479 winning percentage. For 2023, if you use those winning percentages from last year as a starting point, the Cardinals would have the easiest schedule in the National League and the second easiest schedule overall with a .487 winning percentage, opponent winning percentage. So, in other words, the opponent winning percentage, at least at the start, it is increased, but not by much, and they'll still have, at least going into the season, based on last season, they'll have the easiest schedule in the National League and second easiest by a point in Major League Baseball. I find that interesting. So the schedule may not be as tough as we perhaps anticipated.
Yeah, maybe not. And there's going to be a surprise team or two, like maybe Seattle was a surprise team last year, and they might even be better this year. They made a lot of moves, you know, in the offseason, signing guys. They got Colton Long now and some other guys. And maybe you'll see American League East is going to be strong all the way through. I only find Oakland is a really bad team in the American League. I guess Detroit might be a little better, maybe, but still, a team like Seattle will surface and cause problems for teams that maybe didn't think they were going to have any trouble with a team like that.
Commish, let's switch to our great friend Rick Hummel's with us, the Hall of Fame baseball writer, who will continue. He's technically or officially retired from the Post-Dispatch, but he'll be doing some freelance work for STL today, and we look forward to his work for a long, long time to come. Wanted to ask you this. Let's talk about Jordan Walker. He's on my mind because there's been a lot more. There's been updated prospect ratings from Keith Law and ESPN and some others. With all the players the Cardinals have, they're going to, or at least planning to participate in the World Baseball Classic. I mean, obviously the young big fella is going to get a lot of swings. Is it your sense that the Cardinals would like for him to put on a show to the point where he takes the decision out of their hands about starting the season with the big club? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think they'd like to. I mean, the rules have changed a little bit. You don't have to worry about, those arbitration things. And if you play, you get some X amount of days, you keep in the minors, you don't have to pay for another year of arbitration. That's pretty much by the boards now. In fact, those guys, the young players, are rewarded if they get to the big league sooner. So I think they want him to succeed beyond mostly a shadow of a doubt, where he can be so good they can move some of those outfielders, those extra outfielders they have, for some pitching help.
Commish, do you think all right, no, here's the follow-up. I'm sorry. So let's say Walker is up early. Maybe it's a Gorman type thing like last year. If he doesn't make the club out of spring training, maybe we'd see him in May sometime if he gets off to a bad start. I'm just going with hypotheticals. Once he arrives, how do you see the outfield assignments being doled out by Ali Marmol? Like, how would you envision the lineup? You think he'll go with 3 and, have a pretty set outfield lineup, or is he going to be doing a lot of mixing and matching? Just give us your thoughts on that, please.
Well, I think he might mix and match and with the DH in play. And we know that Walker does not play center field.
Right.
And I think he mostly played right field in the minors. That doesn't mean he couldn't play left field, too.
Right.
But, I'm more curious to see how he doles out the assignments for Nolan Gorman. You just mentioned him. I see a lot of projections don't have him playing anywhere. Well, why not?
It's kind of nuts, right? I agree with you, man.
He had 30 home runs last year between Memphis and St. Louis. And if Dowd is going to play second base, and he's not an outfielder, and if Yepes or one of the outfielders is going to DH and Gorman's not, well, where does he play? I don't want to trade him yet. He's the left-handed power guy they've been looking for years, since Oscar Taveras.
It's crazy.
As far as that guy, but Gorman is.
I believe it was like as of August 17th. That's pretty late in the season. The Gorman was slugging 477. 80% of his season was really good. Yeah, you'd like to see fewer strikeouts, but every manager is willing to trade some strikeouts for home run power. But so he's 80% into the total number of games he played for the year, and he was slugging 877. He had I think 12 homers at that point, and he was driving in runs, and he also was even drawing some walks. I mean, everything was great, and then he just kind of plummeted for the final 6 weeks. But so did Paul Goldschmidt. So it's not. That's baseball, man. People lose it. They go into slumps, especially 22-year-olds on their first trip through the big leagues.
And with Tommy Edman gone to Korea for the World Baseball Classic, and that team's probably going to make the Final Four, where he's going to be out of commission for 3 or 3.5 weeks with the Cardinals. There's plenty of time for Gorman and Paul DeJong to play second and short, respectively, and let's see how it looks. Let's get them both a whole bunch of at-bats. Let's not DH them. Let's put them out there and play them. And DH some other trying to bring along slowly, like maybe Contreras, or some of the other outfielders. I'd go for looking at Gorman as much as I could in March and even in late February after those guys get out of there.
And he needs the reps defensively as well. It's a good opportunity for him to just play a lot of second base, because he's very inexperienced when he, coming into the assignment last season. And I thought of you the other day when I was at Friendly's, and I went on one of my rants, although I was not too loud. I was just, my voice was intensified, but I wasn't screaming or anything. But, there's so much being made about his defense. Like, oh, well, without the shifts, oh, man, you can't play him there. Did any of Jeff Kent's employers ever say that? And I looked it up, and that's your guy. I know you're a big Jeff Kent guy. I mean, I looked it up. I looked at some of his defensive ratings. They were not good. They're kind of Gorman-esque, actually, as far as the defensive run saved. Gorman was like a -5. Kent, his last 7-8 years, was a -5 each year at the average. He's also hitting 30-some home runs. No one really cared about whether, a couple of ground balls got through. So hey, listen, man, I appreciate defense. Don't get me wrong. You do too. But why are so many people just utterly obsessed with this? The point is you'll trade some plays not made for big home runs that can win you games.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember Gorman making a lot of plays because of the shift.
Right.
Where he's
You're right.
in short right field. I mean, I didn't notice anything spectacular out there. The Edmonds playing there, it's different. If Donovan might have made a play or two, but I don't remember Gorman making any plays of any consequence. So what's the difference whether you have a shift or not? He's not going to get to it.
And well, that's right. And you know, I don't have the number in front of me, but your instincts are not surprisingly, your instincts are spot on, because he actually, when they had the shift on last year, if you go by Fielding Bible, he was I think he was like a -2. So that's okay. That's not awful. It's a little tad below average, but the point is, he wasn't saving runs by being in the shift. He was pretty average, maybe slightly below average. The Cardinals also don't shift nearly, or last year, they didn't shift nearly as much against left-handed batters as the rest of the industry. They were like 28th in terms of the percentage of times they put the shift on against left-handed bats. So the whole shift thing is generally, it's gone now, but the whole thing is overrated because the Cardinals were not a shift crazy team anyway last year. So Gorman this is no dramatic change for him. And if he hits home runs, no one will care.
And mark my words here, this is the one guy that they have, if you give him up and he comes back to be the player that everybody expected him to be a year ago, you're really going to hate yourself.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt. Commish, a couple more things real quick, my friend. Do you think the Cardinals have enough in the bullpen?
No. I don't like the left-handed side of it at all. I don't see anything that encourages me about the left-handed side of their bullpen unless Cabrera would recapture his form of, 21 and 20, what there was of 20, and a little bit of 19, I guess. But Thompson doesn't do much for me. Romero doesn't do much for me. I don't see that guy down there. Those guys down. I know some of those right-handers get left-handed batters out, but you got to have a left-hander or two that are there primarily to get left-handed hitters out. And I don't think they have that guy. I mean, Andrew Miller would be a good look. I mean, not, of course, he's also 40-some years old now, but I think that part worries me a lot. The right-handed side is okay with Helsley and Gallegos. Stratton was good. Palante was good. Hicks, I'd like to see Hicks be consistent. At least he made it through a season, but he wasn't consistent anyway. He was a starter, then he wasn't, then he was in Memphis, and then he wasn't, and he was up here, and then he was kind of in and out. He's going to have to be better than what he was. Well, that experiment's over. I mean, the Reyes experiment is already over. Now we're getting pretty close to having to decide on Hicks too.
Oh, that's exactly right. Yeah, and that's another one I don't think about that much. Do you? I talked about and wrote it the other day. I still see the Brewers as the biggest threat to the Cardinals in the Central. What about you?
Well, they got those, Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta's a little behind those two, but those two guys at the top of the line are pretty good, and their bullpen is still okay. Devin Williams will be fine, and the other guys they're okay in the bullpen. They traded Hader at the wrong time. That just blew apart their clubhouse. It was, I know they didn't think he was pitching well. Maybe he wasn't, but he sure pitched pretty good for the other guys. They didn't seem to mind him in the clubhouse. The Cubs have made a lot of moves, but I wonder if Dansby Swanson, whose OPS was like 746 or something, can he really be the best player on your team? They're paying him as he should be. It's Cody Bellinger. Is there anything left in that? I mean, his numbers for the last 3 years have been horrid. Trey Mancini. I mean, it's a great story. He came back from cancer and he had okay years at Baltimore, but he was lost in the playoffs except for that play. He stumbled into at first base in the World Series when Gurriel got hurt and Mancini had to play there. And suddenly the ball found him, and he was a hero. Well, is he really a good player?
It's a good point.
Nico Horner's a nice player. I like him. I saw a lineup the other day that had, the Cubs changes, Patrick Wisdom wasn't in it. How can he not be in it? He had 53 home runs the last 2 years.
He he'll be getting his swings. I don't know if they're going to use Morel there or what, but he'll certainly surface in that spot from more than maybe quite a bit actually. But you're right. I guess technically they don't list him as a starter.
And I don't know. We haven't seen Jameson Taillon for a little bit. He was with Pittsburgh and was very good as a high pick and successful for a while. Then he missed a year or two with injuries, and then the Yankees had him, and they really didn't make much use of him toward the end of the year. He'd been hurt with them too, so he's one of their new guys. I like Marcus Stroman. I think their pitching is okay. Bullpen, they had some young guys that did okay, but I don't. That's going to be hard for Dansby Swanson to be the leader of a club when he's never been the leader of the Atlanta Braves. They had 3 or 4 guys better than him every year he was there.
Absolutely. Kamish, it was a joy as always to talk to you. Look forward to maybe we'll definitely exchange some thoughts on the Super Bowl next Friday. We have a week to take in all the information and form some thoughts. But I hope you have a great weekend.
Well, thank you. I hope you do too.
Yep, I will. I get to rest. Get to shut her down. We'll talk to you a week from today. Thank you so much. That's our dear friend Rick Hummel here on the Bernie Show. Jim, here we're going to take another break, but I love Twitter. I have a love-hate with Twitter, but sometimes it's actually fun because these debates will just pop up out of nowhere. And my first response is to say, well, this is kind of dumb. But then I look at it, I'm like, actually, it's kind of fun. So of all things, you know what they're debating about today? And I'm not being critical. It's kind of fun, actually.
Okay, yeah.
One of these prospect people probably said something along the lines of like, Jordan Walker's going to be really good, and he'll. Just like a former Cardinals prospect who was like highly touted, he'll probably have the kind of career offensively that J.D. Drew did, right?
Ooh.
And, of course, J.D. Drew bats left-handed and Walker's right. But on top of that, it just immediately became would you be happy with Jordan Walker if he had J.D. Drew numbers? And I guess the poll that our friend Kyle Reese put up, I haven't looked at the results. I'll look. When we take a break and come back. But apparently everyone was going nuts, blasting J.D. Drew and saying, like, well, if, Walker has a J.D. Drew career, then he'll be a big disappointment. I don't know about that. First of all, I think Jordan Walker will be here longer than J.D. Drew. And J.D. Drew was traded only because Scott Boras was going to take him to free agency in a year. And Walt Jocketty smartly got something, kind of sold high. And I think, wasn't that the Wainwright trade with Atlanta?
I'll have to double check that one. Yes,
but anyway,
yes, it was.
Yeah, so I think that worked out okay. Actually, people should be grateful that J.D. Drew had Scott Boras as an agent. And it was very clear he wasn't willing to re-sign with the Cardinals because he wanted to go to free agency. So Atlanta rented him for a year, and then he was off to Boston. And the Cardinals got Adam Wainwright out of it. I think that's okay. But anyway, J.D. Drew's average year for the Cardinals, his average season, 1998 through 2003, he hit .282. He had a .377 on-base percentage. And he had a slugging percentage just under 500. A lot of doubles, triples, home runs. Not home runs as in 35, but there were times, you look at the plate appearances, like he never got to 500 plate appearances because of injuries, and also I think they tried to keep him away from left-handed pitchers. He was about 25% above the league average as a Cardinal. Now, I would want Walker to be above that. But my point is, it's not like J.D. Drew was garbage here, right? He was a really good hitter. He was a really good player. Bit of a head case.
Oh, yeah.
And Walker will not be that. I'm confident he will not be that. But it's one of those sometimes fun, goofy
it is.
Twitter things are entertaining.
As I'm thinking it through, I would put one asterisk by it and say, If you give me the healthy J.D. Drew, I would say yes, I'd be happy with that. It was all about the injuries with that guy. If he, and you use this term, go to the post. If he could go to the post all the time, he would have been a Cardinal for a long time, I think. That was his issue. When he was healthy, he was pretty he was more than talented. He was a good baseball player for this team. He just couldn't be there all the time, which I know drove Tony La Russa, crazy. So if Jordan Walker could be healthy and be J.D. Drew, I'd say, yeah, that'd be good. I'd be all right with that.
Yeah, and again, and J.D. Drew, well, actually, he was young, and Walker's going to be young, and I don't know how to project what Walker might do, when he's approaching free agency. I mean, we don't need to get in, right? There's no need to jump into all that. It's kind of funny, but if those of you get on Twitter, go take a look at it. It's got some of our friends on there too, so it's kind of a fun deal. But JD at the end of the day, I mean, his major league career, 14 years, he hit 280. His on base percentage was really high. His slugging percentage was close to 500. He was about 25% above the league average based on the standards at the time. Good. I mean, he had a good career. Not great, no, but really good, I would say, right?
Yeah.
And he played in over 1,500 games. Wasn't the most durable guy,
Yeah, that's just it with him. If he could have stayed healthy. One
of my favorite things is, Drew was kind of aloof, and the other Cardinals at that time didn't necessarily understand him. They didn't dislike him. They just had a hard time connecting with him, and because he didn't have much enthusiasm for that. Not that he was a bad guy, because I don't think he was. I'll never forget, though, Will Clark decided when he joined the Cardinals and he did his own scouting reports that a lot of the teammates of J.D. Drew said, well, he's kind of withdrawn. He kind of goes his own way. He doesn't get involved. He doesn't really hang out with us or whatever. And Will Clark said, I'll get him going. And so Will Clark, after every game, in fact, I can see it like it was yesterday. Will Clark, after every single game, he'd go sit by, when the Cardinals won especially, he'd go sit at his locker, he'd take his cleats off, he'd unbutton his shirt, put his feet up on something, and then he would start barking at J.D. Drew, Hey, J.D.
Oh, boy.
You ain't got me my beer yet. You better get your ass moving. Bring me my beer.
Oh,
did you forget something? Did you forget about that? It's like he would just razz them and just it's just like then you'd hear him again. I'd be over interviewing somebody else on the other side. Then like 20 minutes later, JD, need another beer. Don't make me wait, It was just funny.
That's good.
Believe it or not, JD actually got a kick out of it. He wasn't mad or like he didn't feel disrespected. He actually got the humor in it.
That's good.
Because Will Clark was nuts,
Yes, he was.
Term of endearment. The other thing Cardinals players would tell me is like on the bus or the airplane, the team plane, J.D. Drew was always obsessed with whatever the new electronic technology thing just hit the market. He was obsessed. Like he had to have every toy that there was, like a portable thing, like a mini game player, something, the latest phone. He's constantly just like he'd be on the bus and they'd look over and he's got like 5 or 6 gadgets out. And his mind's totally lost in that, right?
Yes.
The other thing, one other J.D. Drew story, and I promise his last one. He went to a car dealer friend of mine. We're talking about really upscale vehicles. A lot of money. Top of the line kind of money.
Yeah.
He wanted I don't remember what the car was, but it was luxury for sure. It might have been a truck, like a SUV or something, or something. So he buys 2. He buys one for his wife, buys one for himself. Okay. About 2 weeks later, he comes back. He says, we just don't like these. I know they're nice, but with that just ain't for us. We're Southern people, and I think we just need to roll into a real nice pickup truck, brand new pickup. So JD Drew, like 2 weeks after buying these luxury SUVs at a huge price, he traded them in for 2 pickup trucks. So Cardinals teammates were, kind of mystified by this. They said, JD, you should have some money coming back in that deal. Why didn't you get Boris on this? Have Boris send one of his lackeys here to buy them cars for you.
That's good.
Oh man, it's pretty good stuff.